welcome to our third session of the day. Again, I pulled the lucky card and get to introduce my friend Robin. Her bio, this is frustrating, so her bio says, Robin is a collaborative, energetic finance leader who thrives on partnering with a business to drive real results. And again, I wanted to share that because Robin that is true in everything that she does. She is a natural connector and collaborator. We are really good friends. We like to go to music together, all the fun things. It's not really relevant to this particular talk, but she also does amazing things with her other business, which she might tell you a little bit more about. She has another event this evening. So please welcome my friend Robin.
Handouts, Rena?
Oh, I guess.
Yeah. They're over there. They got moved. Thank you for that warm welcome. It's always fun when you come and a friend who knows you on all facets of your personality introduces you. So thank you for coming this afternoon. I'm so excited to be here. It's my first time at U Conference, and it's wonderful. It won't be my last time. So we're here to talk about In the Flow with Cash. This is a business finance presentation, but I hope you won't be bored. I promise you won't be bored. We're going to make it fun. So I want to share with you a little bit that for many of you don't know me, my career journey has actually been part of my life journey. I think they are intertwined. So this is logos and images of all the companies that I've worked for over the course of my career. I've been had the title accountant, controller, director of financial planning and analysis, program manager. And let's connect on LinkedIn. You can see all these different jobs. The beauty of it is I've been in a lot of different industries. But what I do want to share is the things that I've learned about myself through the course of my career. And so the first was I actually took a very entrepreneurial approach to my career in really corporate finances is what I've done, because my favorite jobs are those that didn't exist until I took them. So I had some guidelines of what they wanted, but I had the creative freedom to make the job my own. And what I'd like to do is go bring order to chaos or create structure where it doesn't exist. And then figure out how to do something for the first time or two. When it gets routine and steady state, I'm ready to move on. Somebody can maintain it when it gets, tactical, repeatable. The other thing that I learned about myself is collaboration is key for me. I'm a finance person who likes people more than numbers. And so I was always volunteering when I spent 14 years at Pearson Education. So anytime there was a cross-functional team getting together, I was volunteered to be the finance spoke because I wanted to be in that room helping drive change. Let's see, what other things did I learn about myself over the course of this beautiful career? I like to lead through change. I like, and part of that I learned to bet on myself. I was at Ruffalo No Lovitz. I had a boss, a chief financial officer, who worked 24/7. I, one summer, had to cancel 3 out of 6 weekend plans because I had to work. And I often led budgeting and forecasting. And at that time, we were heading into budget season, and I just was working every weekend. And I was like, you know what? I love my life outside of work. At that point in my life and in my career, I didn't need the job to validate me as a person. So I quit that job in December of 2016 without having anything else lined up. My kids were through college. I didn't have a husband at home that was worried that my paycheck might be less. And so I just bet on myself. I took the month of December off because nobody was going to hire a finance person in December. And started looking for a job in January. By February 17th, I was hired at Blue Prairie and Meld. Blue Prairie was a tech startup company. helping businesses move to the cloud, and Meld is strategic marketing and branding. Both were owned by Michelle Bates, had Blue Prairie, and Melinda Pratarelli had Meld. And so I came in, we had a staff of like 12. I was the oldest person on the staff, and it was wonderful. I loved the startup life because I got to pull from all the things that I'd learned over the course of my career, my finance skills, my accounting skills, my program management skills, bid and proposals. Because of the jobs I'd had to that point, because I did budgeting, I really understood how the business worked and how money should flow. And so I got to apply those in a startup, and I was like, oh, this is so fun. But then as startups go, the two companies came together at the beginning of the year. The owners had different risk tolerance, management styles. So the company split, and I went with the tech company, and then the next year she sold it to Involta, which is a local company. They were a data center company, and it was really not a cultural fit for me. But as I started, looking for other jobs, and I landed at the University of Iowa as the finance support for IT. So three of my jobs in my career have been when I was the finance support for IT. And what I loved about that is I learned the IT language, and I helped them understand their financials. So this educator and helping people understand the financials and the meanings of the numbers and getting over the fear of numbers has been a consistent throughout my career. The bottom row is people, true startups and entrepreneurs that I've had a chance to help. The first was Kelsey Schoaf, who does my beautiful hair color. And she was at Twin Image in Iowa City and was thinking about starting her own salon. And she was very good with numbers. She just didn't know how to structure them to see if she could make any money at it. So I said, I kept volunteering. I'll help you. So she finally took me up on that. And so we ran the models to see, if you took on a brick and mortar salon and this many and all those things, and it was super fun. I got half off my hair for a year for doing something that I love to do, And she ended up doing a booth rental, which was really smart of her because she did it right before COVID. And then Taze Hemp is a CBDA distribution company. Turalurico, if you guys don't know Erica Christensen, please follow her. She does candle bars, dry floral bars. We met because I bought one of her candles at a summer market, and then became friends, and I did some coaching with her. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today is using the example of what I did with her. It won't be her numbers, but the process and what I did is what we'll walk through. And I will tell you the things she said about our work together as we go through. And then Aeolian Heart, Josette LeBlanc, and Lava de Stone are astrologers and energy healers. The businesses that my new journey, Robin Springer Consulting, Business Financial Consulting, and Rabinia Presents is it's my creative outlet. And so through that, I do spiritual events, I host astrology workshops, and intend to book live music. I haven't booked any yet, but it's a creative outlet. Those are the things that I love to do creatively, but I'm never going to burden it with paying my bills. And as a matter of fact, I'm presenting for the consulting business right now. And tonight at 7 o'clock, I'm leading a spring equinox circle in Coralville. So if anybody's interested, tickets are on Eventbrite. But the idea for these businesses really came out of that astrology. I took a 6-month astrology course in 2021, and that's where it's like, okay, this is where I need to go. This is what I need to do next. And so this has been a journey of owning all facets of me and bringing a different energy to money, which is why I'm here. So our goals for today are to demystify the jargon by explaining the language of business finance. That'll happen throughout our time together. Bring order to chaos by providing structure for tracking finances. Gazing into the crystal ball by illustrating income and expense forecasting. We'll get in the flow by reviewing a cash flow statement. And release fear by gaining insight into money. And so one of the things that you'll notice is I'm using really magical, mystical language to talk about money and finances. And a lot of people don't do that. And when I was going through that astrology course, Aleister Crowley, we had a quote from Aleister Crowley. He was lived from 1875 to 1947, an English occultist, philosopher, magician, poet, painter. He defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. And what I loved about that is this notion of science and art coming together. What we're going to talk about today, science is the financial structure that we're going to talk about, but the art is the creativity and how we create that to work for your business. The other reason I use the magical language is about 3 months after I'd been working with Erica, we had a group of women business founders that were working together, just meeting periodically to share our journeys. And she's like, thanks to Robin's money magic, I'm going to stop doing that because I don't make enough money at that, but I'm going to do more of this. And I see that there's peaks and valleys in my business, so I'm going to lean into those peaks, and in the summertime I'm going to enjoy being with my family. And I was like, really, it wasn't magic, it's just me doing what I do. She said, no, Robin, it was money magic. And so I was in the middle of developing my website at that time, and I went out for a walk that night. I'm like, girl, just fucking own your magic, And so that's why I'm going to use magical language as we go through, because it is as what you don't understand becomes more clear, it does feel like magic. So if we think about our money, this is really what we want the desired state to be. There's a steady stream flowing in, it's accumulating, it's coming and going, calm, peaceful. Who doesn't want to be at this place at this time, particularly with their money? The reality is actually it often feels like it's gushing out or it's trickling in. And so how do we navigate through that reality? So now I'm going to ask, how do you feel about your money? If you stop and take a deep breath, how do we feel about money? Teeter-totter, ups and downs, imbalance, always juggling, waiting for a plate to drop and crash, or at a point of zen. And you can feel all of these in the same day, or you may feel any one of these for an extended period of time. It's my mission to bring a heart-based approach to money. Everybody says, do what you love and the money will follow. But do you know what to do with the money when it arrives? And there's a whole bunch of questions in my little description of the course. I promise that's in the book. I had the answers to those questions, but it wasn't in a format that made it into the book describing the course. So if we think about money, we're not taught any good stories about it. Most of us fear looking at our bank accounts. And a lot of what I do as we work together is I listen for any money stories that might be getting in your way. And actually, Sarah said it this morning. We have to learn to love our fear. One of the epiphanies that I had in some client work is your money wants you to love it, and it wants to love you. You want to be in a loving relationship with your money. Your money is not your bad boyfriend, but we're not taught that. And so that's really what I'm trying to do with helping business owners understand their money and let go of those stories that really aren't true, that weren't yours to begin with. One of my favorite books that I recently read is called The Soul of Money, Reclaiming the Wealth of Our Inner Resources by Lynn Twist. And she said, what you appreciate appreciates. And I think that's very true with our money. So the first thing we're going to talk about is bringing order to chaos. So entrepreneur life, this is what we think it's going to feel like when we work for ourselves. We're going to be zen, everything's going to flow, it's going to be awesome. And what it actually feels like is, oh my God, what's going on? All the things going crazy. And so at least from a financial perspective, my goal today is to try to help bring some structure around that so it's a little bit less stressful for you. The devil's in the details as you're starting your own business. Set up a separate bank account and try to run everything through the separate bank account right away. Then you don't have to struggle. One of my clients has 2 businesses, and she runs both businesses through her personal bank account. I said, no wonder you're stressed. You have no idea how you're doing in any of those aspects of your life. Save and track your receipts, whether that's pictures on your phone, saved in a Google Drive, a shoebox, whatever. Track your receipts. Talk to a tax accountant to make sure you set up the business structure you choose, impacts your tax filing. So even me, I didn't do that. I started Rabinia Presents first. It's not going to be taxed with making my, paying my bills, but I set it up as an S corp, which made it a separate business entity. So I had to pay for a separate tax return. And the universe tried to make it hard. I had to fax in the paperwork to do that. It didn't go through the first time. I had to go to the public library to fax it again. And then once you set it up, it's really hard to get the IRS to unwind that, so talk to a tax accountant to set it up right from the beginning. Have all your supporting documentation for your income taxes. You may need, the other reason you talk to them, you may need to make quarterly estimated payments. You might have sales tax or use tax. Talk to the expert, because you're going to be overwhelmed and you're going to live in fear you're not doing it right. So talk to the resources you need to help with that. As I go through today, raise your hands if you've got any questions at any time. I'll take them whenever. As you start your business, you're probably looking like, where's the money going to come from to do this? I wanted to share some funding sources. Certainly your personal funds, your own bank accounts. Grants are great if you can find them. They don't have to be repaid. Crowdfunding can work. There's a lot of different WeFunder places that usually the way those work is you get some friends and family to make some initial donations through the crowdfunding, and then people from all over can invest in your business, small amounts of money. Loans, there's the traditional banks, there's SBA, Kiva, if you don't know Caitlin Byers with the Kiva of Iowa program, through New BOCO, you should. They are a crowdfunding source, but there's 0% interest. The max they can do is $15,000. Their requirements around credit score are usually a little bit more lenient than a traditional lending environment. State and local governments are often offering grants. If you're not registered as a targeted small business in Iowa with the Iowa Economic Development Corp, you should be. That gives you the ability, a lot of times when corporations, like when I was at Pearson, when we were bidding on state contracts, they called them meeby-weebies. They had to have so much of the contract had to be minority and women-owned businesses. Being registered as a targeted small business in Iowa makes you eligible for those types of opportunities. You can get a line of credit with the bank. Depending on the size of the business, you might get investors, joint capital, venture capital, private equity funds, or friends and family.
What's the difference between the loan and line of credit? Can you kind of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so a line of credit is something you just draw on as you need it.
Okay.
So it works very similar to a home equity line of credit. So you might be approved for a $25,000 line of credit, and you don't have to pay anything on the line of credit unless you use it. So let's say you have to make payroll. Your cash is running short, so you take $10,000 out of the line of credit to help meet your payroll needs. Then you're only going to pay interest on the $10,000 that you've taken. Whereas if you go to the bank to get a loan, they're going to loan you $25,000. You're going to have to make monthly payments and pay the interest on that, just like you would your mortgage or a car loan. Okay? So line of credit's a good option if you have, that you temporarily need money. Any other questions? That's a good one. All right. So the type of business that you have impacts your costs. If you're going to have a brick and mortar store, we heard Hannah talk about that, but she found ways to make that work. But that's going to be a little bit more expensive, particularly from a startup point, than and a manufacturing is going to have a way higher startup costs than if you're a creative. Or if you're in the restaurant business, that's probably going to have a higher startup cost because you probably have to buy all the equipment and the inventory of the food, all of those things. Whereas if you're running the online businesses, like everybody tried to tell Hannah to do, that's going to be so great. It's low startup cost, but maybe low return too. So consultants like me, it's not expensive to run a coaching, a consulting type of business from a cost perspective. Or you may be in the trades. So the type of business you have will impact your cost structure and basis. The first thing you're going to have, and these are in your handouts now, that's why I wasn't sure how big the screen would be in here. Please pardon any, I tried to catch the spelling mistakes that were in the handouts, but I'm not sure I got all of them. If you're a maker, product-related costs, you're going to have inventory. And this is where we start seeing structure come in. You can see the different types of expense categories that you've got. And then this might also be, you might hear an accountant call it a chart of accounts. What a chart of accounts is a grouping of different categories of income and expense. And if you're starting up your business, some of those might be one-time costs. If you're setting up a brick and mortar store, you're going to buy your racks to display things likely once. That's not going to be a monthly recurring cost. Whereas your utilities, your rent, those types of things will be monthly. So as you start thinking about your cost structure, you're going to have money to cover the initial one-time investments and then the ongoing monthly costs. And then there's all the administrative costs, cost for your marketing, for your professional services, any accountants, legal, payroll services, licensing, permits, things like that. Insurance, you can't be without it. And it's important to understand what kind do you need. Do you need liability? If you're selling online, you might need cybersecurity. If you've got employees, you need workers' comp. If you've got employees, you may offer health insurance. You might have employee-related costs, payroll taxes. Payroll taxes, the employer pays half, the employee pays half. You would have hardware, the computers, the printers, things you need, and then the software to go on those. And if you're traveling, keeping track of your mileage, if you're going, traveling to visit customers, office supplies, others, those are kind of general categories. You may not need all of them. They're pretty basic. There might be other things that are more unique to your business. So now we're going to get into the part where we're talking about predicting the future. This is where it gets hard. It's Excel on a spreadsheet or on a presentation doesn't work great. So again, this is there. This is where we start looking at our cash outflows by month. This is exactly the process that I took Erica Christensen with Turalura. And she's a candle maker, is where she started. And she pivots all the time. I love her bravery in doing that. And so she had a lot of inventory costs up front to buy the wax and the candle holders, or she was making concrete candle holders for a while, and the wicks and the sealants. And so as a maker, if you're a creative, you're going to have a lot of inventory costs up front, and then you got to go make your products, and then you got to go sell your products. So you have a big cash outflow up front, and then you have some time while you do some stuff, and then you have the time when the cash starts coming in. That's important to understand if that's the type of your business. And Hannah and anybody else that's got a business, if you want to share any examples of how you've experienced this as I go through, please feel free to do that as well. And so in this example, you can see there are, in the early months, some high startup costs to get that space. You have to pay a security deposit. You got to get all your utilities set up. And then you got to go, and you might need shipping materials. And then the administrative costs may lag behind a little bit, depending on, you have to start your marketing and your advertising. What means are you going to do that? How much is that going to take to obtain your business? You may employ some legal help one time up front and then hire an accountant as soon as you can. It's not just because I don't offer accounting services. I can do accounting. It doesn't feed my soul. So I want to work with the accountants, and they will do it cheaper than I would. But the sooner you can outsource the accounting, the better off you'll be, because you're going to not like to do it. You're going to think you're not doing it right. Oftentimes they're not expensive. And your time is valuable. So the more time you have to spend on your business, because you've outsourced some of those things, the better off you're going to be. This example, I didn't do any payroll in it. I didn't want to complicate it with employees and salaries, but process-wise, it would work the same. A lot of times your software subscriptions, you're paying for Google, you're paying for your CRM, your customer resource management, your email system, all of those things on a monthly basis. So these are just illustrative examples of how I structure looking at your cash outflows. And you start with a guess. What's your best guess? And over time, you're going to get better at estimating what your cost outflows are going to be. So then we get to the part where everybody's show me the money. Jerry Maguire is one of my most favorite movies. How much am I going to make? What should I sell my products for? Things like that. What I want to talk about is the difference between price and cost. From a price perspective, this is what you charge the customer. If you're a maker, you'll think about what's my retail price versus if I'm selling it to somebody wholesale, the wholesale price is going to be lower because they have to make a margin on it. If you're in the restaurant business, cost of food and price of food versus your beverages. As a consultant, are you going to do hourly rate? Are you going to do flat fee? How do you want to do your pricing? You might do subscription-based services. From a cost perspective, this is your investment in the product or service that you're offering. It might be your raw material and indirect costs if you're a maker. If you're like Hannah, may have products that she sells for retail, so it would be the products purchased for resale. Are you a retailer or are you a consignment in your?
Yeah, so we're a consignment. We operate on a subscription model.
Fascinating. You might have to think about if you're a coach or a consultant, what are my labor costs? What are my benefit costs? So price minus cost equals the gross margin. And this is where, I'll walk you through the example. This is the exact example I took Erica with her candles. These are not her numbers. This is the structure that we used. We looked at her raw materials that went into the making of the candle, the holder, the wax, the wicks, the things like that. And she was tracking, it was really complicated to go from like ounces to grams of wax and the scents and all that. So she had all the math. She just didn't know how to put it in a format to see if she was making any money at it. And so we brought in the raw materials, the number of units, so we get to a total cost per unit. Indirect costs might be like packaging. If you're putting Wolfables sells dog treats, well, they put little wrappings around those and a ribbon to tie them, or if you're baking cookies, the cookie sheets that you use, you might, or the boxes that you use would be an indirect cost because you're putting a dozen cookies into a box of cookies. And then we looked at the units produced and then factoring in a cost for your labor. It's okay to pay yourself for the labor that you put into making your products, but factor in when you're creating the cost of your products, what would you pay somebody to do that? The first time we did this exercise, Erica put $50 an hour in there. I said, I get that you want to make $100,000 or more a year at your business, but if you do that, the price of your candles is going to have to be too high. Nobody's going to be able to buy them. And so, factor in what you would pay somebody to do that for you. And so in this example, the cost per unit is $26.75, and if you sell it for $50, you're making $23 or 46% as your gross margin. And this was a light bulb moment for her because that's where, if you can imagine making a concrete candle holder, that's a very labor-intensive process. And that was where, after 3 months of working together, I heard her say, I'm going to stop doing those. And it was wearing on her body. I'm going to stop doing those because my margins aren't great. But I realized she does candle pour bars. My margins are better at that. So I'm going to do more of those because she had the data to make an informed decision. I have a couple other examples here. If you're in retail or distribution, you buy your product that you're going to sell maybe for $10 and you apply your own private label to it. That label and your labor costs 70, adds to it. And so your total cost per unit is $12.25, and let's say you sell it for $25. So you're, in that case, making a 51% margin. That sounds good. The reality is margins aren't always that high or often that high, but they may be. And then the last example was just trying to figure out if when you're selling yourself, it's hard to come up with what is the hourly rate. And so when you're developing a coaching, maybe you offer a coaching package, it's not just the time that you spend in the one-on-one coaching. There's the email and communication support that happens before and after. There's research, content creation, things you might have to follow up on. And so maybe as you're thinking about what are those rates that you may not disclose to your client, when you price a coaching package, I wouldn't disclose your hourly rates that went behind building that, but this is just for you to have an idea of coming up with a price there. But then let's just say in this case, the person doing that work, you were paying $80 an hour, but you were charging anywhere from $100 to $150 for that time. This is a way to think about coming up with the pricing of your coaching practice. Now, a 70% margin, on people, that's great if you can get it, but it depends on the skills. It depends on the type of services you're offering, and is the $80 an hour truly what you're paying them as an hourly rate, and then you have to add in the payroll taxes and the benefits on it, or is that fully loaded? So if anybody's interested in having that kind of more detailed conversation on labor costs, I'm happy to do that. And so that's how we bring the structure into determining what our price should be. Now as you go to sell it, you might have several different sales channels. You might be selling your products online, either via your website, Amazon, Etsy. You might be selling through brick and mortar stores, either your own store or you're selling wholesale to other retailers. You might be having events. You may go to the Good Makers Market and different places there. You may do it through make and take courses or classes. And then if you're in a coaching or a services business, you might have your ideal clients. Are they personal? Are they business? It depends. So giving thought and time and energy to what are your sales channels is important. And then that allows us to start estimating the cash inflows. What we did before was the cash outflowing. Now what's it coming in? We're going to look at that, try to estimate that by month as well. So in this case, from a maker perspective, there's an estimate of, which products how much are you selling through your website? How much are you going to make when you go to the events or the markets? If you're selling wholesale, and this one I phased it that wholesale started later in this business journey. And there might be other cash inflows. If you get a grant or your personal investment in the business often happen right away at the beginning. So this is a way to look at cash inflows. Any questions on that? Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So now this is where we get in the flow with cash. This is where we bring the inflows and the outflows together. I did this. This is how I managed the cash when I was at Blue Prairie and Meld. We had contracts, and so we knew what our income was coming in. We knew when we were our outflow, our largest expense was our employees. And we paid our employees every other week, which means twice a year, you're gonna have 3 pay periods. Great from the employee perspective, but when you're the employer, you gotta make sure you have the cash for that third payroll that month. And so I started in the spring, and I think March was probably a 3 pay period month, and we were close. I wasn't sure we were going to have enough cash to make payroll, but we had a line of credit behind us, but even that was tapping out. And so by June or July of that year, I kind of had our financial structure in place, and I did this model, and I knew September was going to be a 3 pay period month, and I was like, ooh, even with the line of credit, we're going to have trouble making that third payroll. And I shared that information with the owners, and they went and landed new business because we could see it coming. This is the predictability, the ability to see when there's going to be a crunch or when there's going to be an excess of cash. And then it's like, well, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to pay down that line of credit or that loan? Or, am I going to give my employees a bonus? Either way, positive or negative, the beauty of this is it allows you to see things coming. What I often talk about is the accountants will give you the rear view mirror look of your numbers. They're going to tell you where you've been. What I do through this process is help you look out your front windshield and set your GPS of where you want to go. And then we might have to course correct. There might be a detour. There might be something that happens along the way. So this really brings in, the total cash that we had coming in, our total cash outflow, and you can see many months it's negative. Really, you probably couldn't run your business that way and stay sane. By the end of the year, we still had the expenses exceeded what we had in income. I did that on purpose for this example. And lots of times startups don't make money their first year or two. So where's the cash going to come from? How are you going to make that happen to keep it going? Getting rowdy down there. Knowledge is power. With this kind of insight, you know what actions you need to take. When I did this for Taste Hemp, the CBD distribution company, he could see that coming. He could try to cut expenses. He could try to bring in, go sell some more. But he could adjust the model to say, you can do what if scenarios through this kind of thing. What if I land this client? What if that one cancels? And what expenses do I have that I can maybe stop based on what those numbers are telling you? So next we're going to demystify the jargon. I always like to think about the teacher in Charlie Brown who did wah, wah, wah. We talk about that. Hopefully the language hasn't been, too cumbersome or foreign today. This is just an example of an income statement. It's also called a profit and loss statement. What it tells you is it's actually measured for a specific period. So like for the 12 months ended December 31st. A bank will ask you for this. And so I wanted to show you the structure of what that looks like. And you can see these are the categories from our previous work and just bringing in the full year total. And it, in this case, the gross margin of 59% is good, but it wasn't good enough. The business still lost money at the end of that year. Next up is the balance sheet. So the balance sheet is as of a point in time. So it's at December 31st or at March 31st. And what it is it shows your assets, which are the things that you own. Current assets have a useful life of 12 months or less, whereas fixed or long-term assets have a useful life. You're going to use them greater than 12 months. It shows your liabilities, which are the amounts that you owe. And the equity is your net investment and accumulated earnings in the business. Assets have to equal liabilities and equity. So it always has to be in balance. And this is something else that a banker may ask you for. Another thing, as you're going to talk to lenders, they may ask you for your business plan financials. That's usually a 3 to 5 year look at your numbers. High level financial statements, you don't have to have that level of monthly detail. Good if you could have it for the first year. The out years, they're going to be looking for what's your growth. Are you increasing sales? Are you increasing profitability? They'll want to know, do you have to have capital expenditures? So if you have to buy equipment up front that you're going to use over 5 to 10 years to deliver the business, or do you have to buy a van? Are you a business that you need a delivery van, or things like that? For the first year, be as specific as possible. Share your assumptions, because they may want to ask you about that. If you have collateral, list it. And if you can tell your story using charts and graphs, that's a good thing. That's overachieving. I think a lot of times when people go to the bank, and the bankers in the room can tell me if I'm wrong, they don't even know what an income statement or a balance sheet is and how to help you structure that. So they know what it is, but they, people don't always know that. And this was a good chance to bring in a Dilbert, because it's been a while since we've seen Dilbert. But you know what? It's honestly what I love about the forecasting and budgeting is it's creative and it's a set of assumptions. For me, it's a game. I want to see, okay, here's our assumptions, and then measure how does the actual performance come in against what we thought, and why is it different, and what are we learning, and how is that going to evolve what we're doing. And that was really the basis of this little Dilbert. So I have some resources for you. I realized I could have done this a little bit. I could have brought in pictures there. Profits First by Michael Mikhailovich is a really great book as well if you haven't read it. This should be in the last page of your handout. If it's not, come get a picture of it. What I loved about that book is he talks about paying yourself first. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs pay themselves last. More money comes in, they're hiring another employee, or they're getting a bigger building, and they're not able to sustain their lives because they're not paying themselves. So as I'm reading this book, I'm like, this makes total sense. I'm going to help business owners do this. And then when I got to the chapter that he talked about doing it in your personal finances, I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to do that. And I sat there, I was like, really? So when you're working for yourself and your business income becomes your personal income, how do you think you're going to manage one without the other? That goes back to that fear of money. How you manage your personal money is really honestly how you're going to manage your business money, because that's how you know to do it or don't know to do it. And so to think you're going to be different in those situations is insanity. And so I actually started implementing the Profits First in my personal. Rena, please. 5 minutes. Okay, yeah, we're at the end. You Are a Badass at Making Money with Jen Sincero is another one of my favorites. And I just read It's Not Your Money with Tasha Silver. That's a fantastic book. If anybody wants to share an aha moment, any light bulbs go off, anything? All right, let's connect. Here's how you can find me. I've got business cards up here if anybody wants to come get them. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Conference, for the opportunity.